This is Kathy from Gadgets Top 321, and in today's video I'm going to be unboxing my latest pen purchase. This was a serious impulse buy. It's a used pen, one that I had on a watch list on eBay, and when it became available, within 10 minutes I think I bought it. Alright, so it came with a converter. Looks pretty good. And it's a Pilot Legno 89S. I've had the Pilot Legno, the Stella, and the Stargazer all on watch on eBay so that I get alerted anytime one becomes available. They are all really going for, I don't know if they're going for high prices, but the ones that are listed now are, they're asking really high prices, and this one became available, when it became available, it was listed at, I think, pretty much the original retail price. And this is similar in shape to my Stargazer, but it's a wood pen. In fact, I thought it was going to be very similar to my Pilot mechanical pencil, the S20, but it actually, this feels like more natural wood, feels more unfinished. This feels a little bit better. Like if I just felt it and didn't look at it, it feels more plasticky. And the research I've done seems to indicate that it's like a, I don't know, maybe it's layers of wood impregnated with an acrylic, and then it's cut into rods and turned like a regular acrylic pen. But it looks to be in pretty good shape. The finials are black plastic. It's a snap cap. All the hardware looks very similar to my Stargazer. This is a number 3 fine nib. And the section is plastic like the Stargazer. I am very excited to try this out. My Stargazer has a medium nib, so I was very happy that this one had a fine nib. This is quite a bit lighter than the Stargazer. The cap is still somewhat heavy because it's got this heavy cap band, but the way that it hits my hand, it feels really good. It just rests right there in the crook of my hand. I like the way it feels. Since this is a used pen, I'm going to flush it out and then try to decide what ink I'm going to put in it. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, I flushed it out. It was really clean. There was no residual ink left in the feed or anything. And I've inked it up with Robert Oster Rose Gold Antiqua. I chose this ink because I recently tested it in several of my pens, and it performed really well in my Pilot Custom 74, which also has a 14 karat fine nib. And I just wanted to try a nice, pretty ink in it. It is scratchy. Let's see. Downstrokes won't hardly write. Upstrokes are writing but still scratchy. To the right, not writing very well. To the left, about the same. It's scratchy in every direction. So I looked at it under the loupe. It doesn't look like the tines are misaligned. But before I break out any micro mesh, I think I'm going to do what I probably should have done to begin with. Flush it out and give it a try with some Waterman Serenity Blue. So before I start trying to do any work on it, that's weird. I'm going to try it with the Waterman Serenity Blue, but it's weird that the downstrokes won't write and the upstrokes do. My Pilot Custom 74 tends to write wetter on the downstrokes and slightly drier, noticeably drier on the upstrokes, but it does write in every direction and is very smooth. So I'm curious to see how this does with the Serenity Blue. I'm going to go flush it out and I'll be right back. Alright, I cleaned it out and now it's inked up with Waterman Serenity Blue. And let's see what happens now. Still a little scratchy, not as bad, but better. And the side strokes, I would say, are even more scratchy than the up and down strokes, but not as bad. I think it's time to use a little micro mesh. Now that's quite a bit better. I'm going to zoom in a bit more. It may require a little more micro mesh as I use it. Oh, that's much better. The side strokes, I think, might need a little bit more. And now it's writing similar to my Custom 74. The downstrokes are wetter, the upstrokes are drier, and I'm okay with that. I like the character it gives my writing. Alright, it's been about 24 hours since I filmed the previous clips, and as you can see from my micro mesh, each one of these little scribbles is where I smoothed a previous pen. Maybe I got a pen that the tines were misaligned and I aligned them and then smoothed it, or maybe the nib was just a little more feedbacky than I preferred and so I would smooth it a little bit. Each one of these is an individual pen. These two big blobs are me working on this pen. And before you panic and say, oh no, she's worn out the nib of the pen, this was done with extremely light pressure. I was worried about ending up with a nib that had baby's bottom, so I just put very little pressure on this, and I would do a writing test and it felt pretty smooth, but then when I would go to do actual writing, it would start catching on the paper and I would think, what is going on here? You can see all the writing tests that I went through. Some of these are front and back. And I just could not get rid of that last little bit of, it was catching on the paper every word or so. And what I figured out was when I'm working on the nib, I'm using light pressure, but when I go to actually write, these nibs, these Pilot Gold nibs, are fairly soft and springy. Just my natural writing, I'm exerting a little bit more pressure and the tines are spreading apart just a little bit, and it must be between the two tines that there are some burrs that are catching on the paper. So I tried one last time. Instead of using the micro mesh with light pressure, I exerted just a little bit more pressure and did some up and down vertical strokes. I may have done a few figure eights, but it took very few passes over the micro mesh, and when I went and did my writing samples, it felt good. I went and wrote an entire page in my journal. It didn't catch any, so that last little bit, putting a little bit of pressure on it, got rid of those burrs inside the tines. I'm going to do one last writing sample. I want to compare the Legno to the fine nib on my Custom 74, and I'd also like to see how it compares to the fine nib, the fine steel nib on my Prera. Okay, here's a close-up look at the nib on the Legno. And when I do the writing sample with the Custom 74, I'll show the two nibs side by side. This is a number 3 fine nib. And the downstrokes are very smooth. Strokes to the right, smooth. Upstrokes are a little bit dry. And to the right, sometimes they're a little bit dry, but still very smooth. Okay, I said I was going to compare this nib. The Custom 74 is a number 5 nib, so it is just slightly larger. But it's also a fine nib. Let's see. The tipping looks basically the same. I've got a different ink in this one. I've been testing Three Oysters Peacock Green. Yeah, I can't really tell a difference in the two. Both very smooth. Downstrokes to the right, up. See how they're a little bit dry, or a lot drier than the downstrokes, and then to the left. And yeah, that's just a characteristic of these Pilot nibs. And because of that, you see you get some nice shading in inks that have a shading quality. Now I don't know if this ink's a little bit wetter, or that's kind of surprising. This is a more saturated ink, so it looks darker. I'm not seeing a whole lot of shading. It looks a little bit lighter at the top of the loop-de-loops. But let's compare this to the steel nib on the Prera. This also has peacock green in it. Very smooth. Down, to the right, up, and to the left. The ink, the way the ink is put down on the paper, I find with the Prera is more uniform. It's not drier in any direction. So, about what I was expecting. So, I'm happy with the way this turned out, and I'm glad I had micro mesh, and I'm glad I was able to get it writing like I wanted it. All right, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.